In the deep sky far away from Earth, there was an empire of powerful aliens. Their cities floated in the air, their towers touched the stars, and their ships could cross galaxies in a single jump. To them, humans were nothing, only a small and dirty race living on a blue planet. They called Earth the Mud World, and they laughed whenever the name was spoken. In this empire lived a princess. Her name was Lyra. She was tall, shining, and proud, with silver eyes that never showed fear. She was raised to believe her people were the strongest in the galaxy. From childhood, she was told that humans were weak, greedy, and filthy. They were considered little more than animals. And now, to her horror, her father, the king, had given her an order. She must marry a human. The news shook her heart like a storm. How could a princess of the stars be forced to join her life with a creature from Earth? Her hands trembled when she heard the words. She thought it must be a cruel joke, but it was not. The Empire wanted peace with humans, and the king had chosen her marriage as the bond. Lyra felt trapped. She wanted to scream, but her royal duty tied her lips shut. The human's name was Daniel. He was a soldier, not a prince, not a noble. Only a simple man in the eyes of the alien court. When Lyra first saw him, her heart almost stopped. He did not look dangerous, but neither did he look weak. His eyes were calm, his shoulders strong, his movement steady. Yet the court whispered and laughed behind his back. They called him the Mud Soldier. They called him the Dirty One. Lyra expected him to get angry, to shout, to fight. But he did not. He only bowed his head, silent and respectful. This silence confused her more than anything. Why did he not show pride? Why did he not answer the insults? She thought maybe he was too stupid to understand. Or maybe he was hiding something. A human could not be that calm in front of so much hate. Something about him made her uneasy. She had faced warlords, hunters, and even assassins before, but this man made her feel a different kind of fear, a fear of the unknown. That night, in her private chamber, she could not sleep. The image of the human's quiet face stayed in her mind. She imagined his rough hands touching her, his strange earth smell filling the palace, his dirty human blood mixing with her royal line. She felt sick. How could she live with such a creature? How could she ever marry him? Her chest burned with shame and terror. She wished her father would change his mind. But she knew he would not. The Empire always placed duty before feelings. Her life was not her own. It belonged to the Empire. The next morning, the palace held a grand ceremony to welcome the human. Bright banners of gold and silver floated above the hall. Alien nobles filled the chamber with laughter and chatter. They expected to be entertained by the sight of a dirty earthman standing among them. Daniel entered wearing simple armor from his world. It was not polished like alien steel, but it carried marks of real battles, scars of real war. Lyra noticed this. She told herself not to care, but her eyes kept returning to the dents and scratches on his chest plate. This was no decoration. This was survival. When Daniel stood before the king, the nobles laughed louder. One shouted, "Careful, my king, the mud may drip on your floor." Another said, "Does he even understand our words?" The laughter rolled like thunder through the chamber. But Daniel did not change. His face was steady, his eyes clear. He bowed deeply, without shame, without fear. And again, silence. No anger, no defense, only calm. The king smiled at this, but Lyra's heart twisted. She wanted him to fail, to shout, to prove her right. Yet the more he stayed calm, the more questions filled her. Who was this man? Why did he not break under their insults? What strength held his voice still? She felt something heavy in her chest, something that was not hate, not yet respect, but something in between. The nobles grew bored and turned their attention away, but Lyra did not. Her eyes stayed on him. She saw a mystery in his silence, a secret that made her uneasy. For the first time in her life, she did not know what to think. The Empire had always told her what humans were, but now, standing before her, was a human who did not fit the story. As the ceremony ended, Lyra walked past Daniel without a word, but her silver eyes caught his brown ones for just a moment. In that moment, something sparked, not love, not trust, but a question. And questions are more dangerous than hate. That night, once again, she could not sleep. She whispered to herself in the dark, "Why did he not fight back? What is he hiding?" The princess felt a cold shiver in her heart. The human was not what she expected, and that made him far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Princess Lyra woke the next morning with heavy eyes. She had not slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the human. His calm face, his silent bow, the way he stood among the mocking nobles without breaking. She wanted to forget, but his image refused to leave her mind. It made her restless. It made her uneasy. Lyra had been taught from childhood that humans were filthy, greedy, and selfish. Her teachers called them the crawling race. They said humans would steal, cheat, and destroy anything for power. To Lyra, marrying such a creature felt like falling into a dark pit with no escape. Even worse, the whole empire would laugh behind her back. How could a princess of the stars lower herself to live beside one of them? She looked at her reflection in the crystal mirror. Her silver eyes were sharp, but she saw fear hiding inside them. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of an enemy on the battlefield, but of a husband chosen for her. The idea made her chest feel tight. She whispered to herself, "He is human. He is dirty. I will never trust him." Yet her words did not erase the memory of the last night. Daniel, the human, had not acted like the monster she expected. He did not shout, did not fight, did not even defend himself. He stood calm while the nobles spat insults. That calmness haunted her. Was it weakness? Or was it strength? She could not decide. Watching the human over the next few days, Lyra avoided speaking to Daniel. She only watched him from a distance. She expected him to reveal his true self, to act cruel, to show greed, to prove the stories right. But what she saw only confused her more. Daniel did not demand fine food or luxury like the alien nobles. He ate simple meals without complaint. He did not command servants harshly. Instead, he thanked them, a strange word from a human's lips, soft and respectful. When machines in the palace broke, Daniel offered his hands to help fix them. His armor carried marks of Earth's wars, and his hands carried the skill of survival. Even the alien engineers, proud of their advanced knowledge, were surprised by his clever solutions. Lyra saw him help an old palace worker lift heavy supplies. No noble would ever do such a thing. The worker looked at him with wide eyes, shocked that a human, would bend his back to help. Lyra felt her chest twist. Was he trying to trick everyone with kindness? Or was this who he truly was? The princess's doubt at night, Lyra lay awake, turning the questions in her mind. Her fear did not fade. In fact, it grew stronger because now she did not only fear his humanity, she feared the way he broke her beliefs. If humans were not the monsters she was taught to hate, then what else in her world was a lie? She remembered the way her people laughed at Daniel during the ceremony. She remembered how calm he stayed. That calmness felt like a wall she could not climb. She wanted to tear it down, to see what was behind his silence, but she was also afraid. What if she looked and found something more dangerous than pride? The princess pressed her hands against her chest. "No," she whispered. "I cannot let him change me. He is only human. He is nothing." But her voice shook and the walls of her room seemed to listen. Deep inside, she knew she was not speaking truth. Rumors in the court. The alien nobles saw her silence and believed she hated Daniel completely. They whispered in dark corners, laughing about the mud soldier. Some said he was too weak to survive in the empire. Others joked he would never touch the princess's hand, but some nobles were not laughing. They saw something different in him. A strength that was not loud but quiet, not sharp but steady. They grew worried. "If the princess starts to respect him," one whispered, "our power may fall. The people might see humans in a new light." Lyra did not hear all their words, but she felt the tension growing. She felt like she was standing between two storms, her own fear and the fear of her people. The moment of change one afternoon as she walked through the palace garden, Lyra saw Daniel sitting by a fountain. He was alone, cleaning a small piece of broken equipment from the training yard. His hands moved with patience, his eyes steady. She stopped behind a tree, watching quietly. Then something unexpected happened. A small alien child ran into the garden, chasing a floating toy. The toy fell into the water and the child began to cry. Before the guards could react, Daniel rose, reached into the fountain and pulled the toy out. He dried it with his sleeve, smiled gently, and handed it back. The child's tears turned into laughter. Lyra felt her heart shake. The man she feared, the man she called dirty, had just comforted a child like a father. No trick, no mask, only kindness. She turned away quickly, angry at herself for feeling moved. Her steps were fast, her breath sharp. She whispered, "No, I cannot trust him. I will not trust him." But her heart did not listen. It beat faster, louder, as if warning her that something inside her was already changing. That night, she stood at her window looking at the stars. She told herself humans were dangerous. She told herself Daniel would betray her. But in her heart, the image of him helping the child glowed like a small fire. It was only a spark, but sparks could grow into flames, and Princess Lyra feared not only the human standing in her palace. She feared the change rising inside her. The question whispered in her mind again and again. What if the Empire was wrong about humans? She had no answer, only fear, and fear, she knew, was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The palace was never quiet. It was filled with music, speeches, and endless shows of power. But on that day, silence fell, a silence sharp as a blade. Something had gone wrong. From deep inside the palace vaults, a sound echoed, a roar, like thunder mixed with fire. The alien guards froze. Their eyes turned wide. The air shimmered with strange energy. Then from the shadows it appeared, an energy beast. It was a creature born from raw power, captured long ago for the Empire's experiments. Its body glowed with blue light, its claws burned like plasma, and its eyes were wild storms. Somehow the beast had broken free. The nobles screamed and ran. Servants scattered like leaves in a storm. Guards raised their weapons, but fear made their hands weak. The beast struck first, knocking them aside like toys. Princess Lyra stood frozen. Her heart pounded. She had trained with blades and studied war, but this was no battlefield. This was her home invaded by chaos. The beast's glowing eyes locked on her. And for the first time in years, she felt truly helpless. Then, a voice cut through the panic. "Stay behind me." It was Daniel, the human, steps forward. He did not wait for orders. He did not look for help. The human stepped between the beast and the princess, his body straight, his eyes sharp. He had no alien weapons, no glowing armor, only his battered earth gear. Yet he stood like a wall. The nobles gasped. Some shouted, "Fool! You will die." Others laughed cruelly, expecting him to be torn apart. But Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She could not look away. The beast roared and charged. Its claws swung down with burning speed. Daniel moved, not with fear, but with focus. He rolled aside, grabbed a fallen guard's spear, and turned it into his weapon. The spear was bent, cracked, useless in noble hands. But in Daniel's grip, it became deadly. He struck the beast's leg, forcing it to stumble. The ground shook as the creature screamed in rage. The fight for survival, Daniel's movements were not elegant. He fought like someone who had survived 100 battles, each one dirty, each one real. He used the walls, the floor, even broken weapons as tools. Every strike was meant not to look strong, but to stay alive. The beast struck again, claws tearing through stone. Daniel barely dodged, the heat grazing his armor. He coughed from the smoke, but did not stop. His eyes stayed fixed on the monster. Lyra could not believe what she was seeing. This was the human she had feared, the dirty creature she despised. He was facing death without hesitation, not for himself, but for her. Her hands trembled. She wanted to shout at him to run, to save himself. But the words never left her lips. She only whispered, "Why? Why are you doing this?" The human's wounds, the battle raged on. Daniel's strength was great, but the beast was stronger. It lashed out, its claws slicing across his arm. Blood, red human blood, splashed onto the white floor. The nobles gasped in disgust. "Filthy!" one cried, but Daniel did not stop. He tightened his grip, ignored the pain, and pushed forward. With a final strike, he drove the broken spear into the beast's glowing chest. The creature shrieked, its body exploding in a burst of light. Then silence. The hall was filled with smoke and dust. Guards and nobles coughed, covering their faces. When the air cleared, Daniel was still standing, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Blood dripped from his wound, but his eyes remained calm, and Princess Lyra was still alive. The princess's confusion. For a long moment, the hall stayed silent. Then whispers spread. Some nobles sneered. "A trick," they said. "Luck." Others stared at Daniel with new eyes, unable to deny what they had seen. Lyra's heart beat wildly. She stepped forward, her silver eyes fixed on him. "You are wounded," she said, her voice sharper than she meant. Daniel looked at her, his expression steady. "Better me than you." The words cut through her like a blade. He had risked his life for her without order, without reward, without fear. No alien noble would have done the same. Her mind screamed that it was a trick, that humans were greedy. Yet her heart whispered something else. She had seen his blood, his pain, his courage. No lie could fake that. A spark of respect that night, Lyra could not rest. She replayed the battle again and again in her thoughts. She remembered the sound of his voice, the sight of his blood, the fire in his eyes. She told herself it was only duty, only instinct, nothing more. But deep inside, a new feeling stirred. Not love, not yet, but respect. Respect for a human, something she had never thought possible. The princess sat by her window looking at the stars. Her heart whispered, "Why did he protect me? Why did he bleed for me?" She had no answer. Only questions. And questions, she knew, were the beginning of change. Far away in the palace, nobles gathered in secret. They did not like what they had seen. "The princess is watching him differently," one hissed. "If she begins to trust him, our power will fall." They nodded in agreement. The human could not be allowed to stay, and so, while Princess Lyra's heart filled with confusion, the shadow of betrayal began to grow. The palace halls had returned to their normal silence, but inside Princess Lyra's heart there was no peace. Days had passed since the fight with the energy beast, yet the memory burned like fire. She remembered Daniel's wounds, the blood dripping onto the white floors, the way he stood between her and death without hesitation. She had been taught her whole life that humans were selfish, greedy, and weak. But what she had seen was different. It was not weakness. It was not greed. It was courage. And now she could not ignore the questions forming in her mind. Why had he protected her? Why did he not fight back when nobles insulted him? Why did he accept silence instead of anger? The questions grew louder, and Lyra knew she could not hide from them anymore. The confrontation. She found Daniel in the training yard one evening. The sun was low, painting the palace towers in red light. Daniel stood alone, practicing with a heavy staff. His movements were simple, not elegant like the alien warriors, but sharp, strong, and filled with purpose. Every strike echoed against the stone walls. Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes fixed on him. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice cutting through the air. Daniel lowered the staff. Sweat ran down his face, but his eyes were calm. "Do what, princess? Why do you let them laugh at you? Why do you stay silent when they call you dirty? Why do you protect me even when you bleed? Tell me, human. What are you hiding?" Her words were sharp, almost cruel, but they carried fear more than anger. She wanted to tear down his silence, to force him to reveal the truth. The human's answer? Daniel looked at her for a long moment. His face showed no anger, no pride, only a quiet strength. Finally, he spoke. "I let them laugh because I know who I am," he said. "Their words do not change me. I have seen worse than insults. I have carried worse than shame. If silence keeps the peace, then silence is enough." Lyra's lips parted slightly. His voice was steady, but behind it she heard weight. Heavy weight, like chains of the past. She took a step closer. "And the beast? Why did you stand in front of me? You could have run. You could have saved yourself." Daniel's eyes softened. "Because your life was worth more than mine in that moment. You are a princess. You carry a whole empire on your shoulders. I am only a soldier. My duty is to protect even if it cost me my blood." The word struck her like a blade of truth. He had not acted for reward, not for glory, but because it was who he was. The hidden past still, Lyra's heart demanded more. "You speak of duty," she said. "But I see something else in you, pain. Where does it come from?" Daniel's eyes lowered. For the first time, his calm face cracked, showing a shadow of sorrow. "I lost my family," he said quietly. "War took them. On Earth, war always takes. My father died in battle. My mother starved during the blockade. My sister..." His voice broke for a moment, then steadied. "My sister was killed when the enemy burned our city. I was the only one left." Lyra felt her chest tighten. She had seen death before, but never spoken so simply, so raw. His words carried no decoration, no dramatics, only truth. "And yet," Daniel continued, "I chose not to hate. Hate destroys everything. I chose to fight, yes, but not for revenge. I fight to keep others alive so they do not feel the same pain I felt. That is all I am. That is all I will ever be." The princess's reflection? The princess stood frozen. She had expected lies, tricks, maybe even anger. But what she had heard was nothing like that. This human had lost everything, family, home, future, and yet he stood here, calm, kind, still ready to protect others. She thought of her own people, proud nobles who would never bow, never sacrifice without reward. And here was a human bleeding for her without demand, without complaint. Her fear began to shift. It was no longer fear of him. It was fear of herself, fear that she had been wrong her whole life, the shadow of betrayal. That night, as she walked back to her chamber, she passed a group of nobles whispering in a dark corridor. "The human must be removed," one hissed. "The princess is beginning to see him differently. If she grows close to him, our influence weakens." "Then we must act before it is too late," another replied. "The mud soldier cannot be allowed to win her heart." Lyra's steps slowed. She felt her stomach twist. For the first time she understood the danger Daniel was truly in. Not from beasts, not from war, but from her own people. Later that night she stood at her window again, looking at the endless stars. Her silver eyes shone with confusion. She whispered, "How can a human carry so much pain and still be gentle? How can a man with no crown stand taller than nobles with golden thrones?" She touched her chest, feeling her heartbeat race. The fear was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer fear of the human. It was fear of what she was beginning to feel. And far away in the hidden chambers of the palace, the plot against Daniel's life began to take shape. The palace looked peaceful under the twin moons, but in its hidden chambers darkness was gathering. The nobles sat around a long table carved from crystal. Their faces were hard, their voices sharp with anger. "The princess has changed," one hissed. "We see it in her eyes. She no longer looks at the human with hate." "Dangerous," another whispered. "If she accepts him, the people may accept humans too. And then our power, our pride will fall." A heavy silence followed. Then a voice spoke with poison. "The mud soldier must be removed. Quietly but completely. His blood will not stain the empire. It will disappear," the nobles agreed. An order was sent. An assassin squad, silent and loyal, would strike during the grand royal feast. The Feast of Unity. The next evening, the great hall of the palace glowed with banners and light. Music filled the air, alien instruments singing strange notes. The nobles dressed in bright silks, their jewels flashing like fire. At the center, Princess Lyra sat beside her father, her face calm but her heart heavy. She had heard whispers in the corridors. She had seen shadows moving where none should be, and though she had no proof, she knew the truth. Daniel was in danger. Her eyes searched the hall until she found him. The human stood among the guards, his armor scratched but polished. He did not sit at the noble table, he was not treated as an equal, but he stood tall, watching, protecting. His calm face gave her a strange comfort, but comfort turned to fear when she noticed movement in the far corner. A figure cloaked in black, eyes hidden, hands resting on curved blades. The assassins had come. The silent attack. The music rose, and in that moment, the assassins struck. They moved like shadows, sliding between nobles and servants, their blades flashing under the light. The first assassin leapt toward Daniel. The spear came fast, meant to end him before he could react. But Daniel's instincts were sharper than steel. He caught the spear shaft with his bare hand, twisted and pulled the assassin to the floor. The hall erupted in screams. More assassins poured in, 5, 6, 7 of them. Their blades glowed with poison light. Daniel pulled a fallen guard's sword and faced them, his body ready, his eyes calm. The nobles screamed and ran, their silks tangling under their feet. Servants dropped trays of golden food, the feast turning into chaos. Princess Lyra rose from her seat, her silver eyes wide. She shouted, "Guards, protect him!" But the guards hesitated. Many were loyal to the nobles, not to her. The human fights alone, Daniel fought like a storm. Every movement was sharp, brutal, filled with the strength of survival. His sword clashed against glowing blades, sparks flying into the air. He blocked one strike, kicked another assassin back, rolled under a spear, and struck with deadly aim. But the assassins were trained killers. They attacked together, circling him, striking from all sides. A blade cut across his leg. Another sliced his shoulder. Blood dripped onto the marble floor, red mixing with gold. Still, he did not fall. He did not give up. He fought not for himself, but for the princess watching in terror. Lyra's heart pounded. She wanted to leap from her throne, to stand by him, but guards blocked her path. She pushed against them, screaming, "Let me through!" But they held her back. The breaking point, Daniel's breath grew heavy. His wounds slowed him, but his eyes never wavered. Another assassin lunged. Daniel caught the blade with his hand, blood spilling from his palm, and drove his sword into the attacker's chest. The assassin fell, but more replaced him. Lyra's voice broke through the noise. "Enough, stop this!" But her cry was drowned by steel and screams. She saw Daniel stumble, his knee hitting the ground. Her chest burned with fear. For the first time, she realized she did not want him to die. Not the dirty human, not the soldier she had feared. She wanted him alive. The princess breaks free. With a sudden surge, Lyra pushed past her guards. Power blazed in her eyes, and for the first time she did not care about noble laws or court whispers. She was not only a princess, and she was a warrior's daughter. She grabbed a fallen guard's blade and leapt into the fight. Her silver dress tore as she swung, cutting down an assassin who came from behind Daniel. The hall froze in shock. A princess fighting beside a human? It was unthinkable. But Lyra no longer cared. She shouted, her voice like thunder, "Protect him, or you will answer to me." The guards who had hesitated now obeyed. They rushed forward, surrounding the assassins. The battle turned. One by one, the attackers were cut down. When silence returned, the marble floor was stained with blood. The assassins lay defeated, their plot destroyed. Daniel stood in the center, his chest rising and falling, his body marked with deep wounds. He swayed, barely holding his sword. Lyra rushed to him, catching his arm before he could fall. Her silver eyes were wet, her voice trembling. "You fool," she whispered. "Why do you always bleed for me?" Daniel gave a weak smile. "Because it is who I am." Then his eyes closed and he collapsed into her arms. The nobles watched in stunned silence, some with anger, some with shame, some with fear. For in that moment, the Empire had seen something it could never forget. A princess standing beside a human, and a human strong enough to bleed for her. The great hall smelled of blood and smoke. Broken weapons lay scattered on the marble floor. The feast of joy had turned into a battlefield. Nobles whispered nervously, their silks torn, their jewels shaken loose. And at the center of it all, Princess Lyra knelt beside the wounded human. Daniel lay in her arms, his armor cracked, his body covered in cuts. His breathing was rough, each inhale like fire, yet his face was calm, even in pain. Lyra pressed her hand against his chest as if holding him to life. Her silver eyes burned with fury. Fury not at him, but at her own people. The assassins had been sent by the nobles. She knew it, and they had dared to try it in front of her, in front of the king. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then one noble broke it. His voice was sharp, dripping with poison. "This is what comes of trusting a mud soldier. Look at him. Filthy blood staining the floor of our sacred hall." Another noble laughed coldly. "He is nothing. He should have died quietly instead of bringing shame into the court." The words struck like knives. Lyra rose slowly, her blade still in her hand, her gown torn and stained. She turned her eyes on the nobles, and for the first time they felt fear. "The princess speaks." "Shame." Her voice thundered across the hall. "You call him shame?" The nobles fell silent. Even the king leaned forward on his throne. Lyra pointed at Daniel, who still breathed weakly on the floor. "This human faced death while you ran. He bled for me while you hid behind silks and jewels. He fought assassins you paid for. And you dare call him dirty?" The words echoed like thunderclaps. Murmurs spread across the hall. Some nobles looked away in shame, others clenched their fists in anger. One noble tried to argue. "He is only a human, princess. His kind is beneath us. You dishonor your people by defending him." Lyra's silver eyes flashed. "No, I dishonor my people if I stay silent. He has shown more honor than any of you tonight. He risked his life for me, for this empire. Even when you spat on his name, tell me, which of you would bleed for a crown that mocked you? Which of you would stand when the world laughed in your face?" The noble had no answer. The hall grew silent again. The human's whisper as the weight of her words hung in the air. Daniel stirred. His eyes opened just slightly, his lips moving with effort. "Princess." His voice was faint, but clear enough for her to hear. She bent closer. "Yes, I'm here." He smiled weakly, blood still on his lips. "I promised never to let you fall." Her heart stopped for a moment. The words were simple, but they carried a weight she had never felt before. A promise not of duty, not of politics, but of truth. Then his eyes closed again, his body limp in her arms. Panic gripped her chest, but she could still feel the faint beat of his heart. He was alive but weak, too weak. The king's judgment. The king finally rose from his throne. his long cloak dragging across the bloody floor. His face was unreadable, his voice deep. "Enough," he said. "This night has revealed much. The human has shown courage more than many of our own, but courage does not erase blood. His kind is still dirt, still unworthy." Lyra turned sharply toward her father, her eyes burning. "Then I am unworthy too, for I chose to fight at his side. Does my blood mean nothing if it stands with his?" The court gasped. A princess speaking against her king, it was unheard of. The nobles trembled between shock and fear. The king's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Lyra, you walk a dangerous path." But Lyra did not bow. She did not lower her voice. "No, father. The dangerous path is to blind ourselves with pride. Look at him. He is human, yes, but he is also brave, loyal, and true. If that is weakness, then perhaps we should all be weak." The court divided. The hall filled with whispers again. Some nobles looked at Daniel with new respect, their arrogance cracking. Others glared with fury, afraid of losing their power. The empire itself seemed to split in that moment, half in denial, half in awakening. Lyra stood tall, her torn gown flowing like armor. She placed her hand gently on Daniel's chest, showing the court where she stood. "From this day forward, I will not hide my choice. This man is no shame. He is proof that we were wrong." Her words cut the hall in two. Outside the palace walls, the night was quiet, but inside, the storm had only begun. The princess had spoken, the human had bled, and the court was broken between old pride and new truth. In the shadows, nobles who hated Daniel clenched their teeth. They would not stop. They would strike again, but in Lyra's heart the turning point had come. She no longer saw Daniel as dirty, no longer as weak, no longer as nothing. She saw him as the one who had stood when all others fell, and that truth once spoken could never be taken back. The palace had not known such silence in 1,000 years. The nobles who once filled the hall with laughter now sat frozen, their jeweled robes heavy with shame or anger. The king, proud and stern, still sat on his throne, but even he could not deny what had been seen. At the center of the hall, Princess Lyra remained standing. Her gown was torn, her silver hair messy, but her voice had shaken the empire. Beside her lay Daniel, the human soldier, his body broken but his spirit unshaken. His blood stained the floor, but to Lyra it shone brighter than the jewels of the court. The choice stood before her: to bow to the empire's pride or to follow the truth burning inside her heart. The princess decides. She turned to her father. Her voice was steady, though her heart thundered like war drums. "Father," she said, "you told me to serve the empire, to be its strength, its future. But today I learned that strength is not in power, not in silks, not in bloodlines. Strength is in sacrifice. Strength is in truth. And today the strongest one in this hall is not a noble, not a king. It is him." Gasps rippled through the court. The king's eyes narrowed, his jaw set like stone. "You would choose him?" he asked, his voice low with warning. Lyra lifted her chin. "Yes, not because you command it, not because of duty, but because I choose it. I will not be forced. My life will not be a chain. From this day I walk my own path, and I choose him." She placed her hand on Daniel's chest, her silver eyes blazing with fire. The human awakens, as if her voice had reached his very soul. Daniel stirred, his eyes opened slowly, heavy with pain. He saw her hand, her face, her tears shining like starlight. "Princess." His voice was rough, barely a whisper. "Hush," she said, pressing her hand gently to his lips. "Do not speak. You have already said enough with your blood." But Daniel shook his head weakly. "You should not risk everything for me." Lyra smiled through her tears. "You risked everything for me first. Now it is my turn." For the first time since she had met him, Daniel's calm eyes filled with something new. Not silence, not sorrow, but hope. The court reacts. The nobles erupted into chaos. Some shouted in anger, "Impossible! She dishonors the empire! A princess with a human? Never!" But others stayed silent, their faces thoughtful, even ashamed. They had seen him fight. They had seen him bleed for her. And deep inside they knew the truth Lyra had spoken. The king raised his hand and silence returned. His gaze swept across the hall from the nobles to his daughter, to the human still struggling to breathe. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly his eyes softened. "The empire has stood on pride for 1,000 years," he said. "Perhaps it is time it stands on something more." The nobles gasped again. Some bowed their heads, others clenched their fists in rage. But none dared to defy the king's word. A new dawn days passed. Daniel's wounds healed slowly, cared for by the finest healers, not because the nobles wished it, but because the princess commanded it. She never left his side. When he could finally stand again, a great ceremony was held. But it was unlike the others. No false laughter, no poisoned whispers. This time the hall was filled with silence, heavy with expectation. Lyra stepped forward in royal armor, not silk. Daniel stood beside her, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as her equal. She raised her voice. I once feared humans. I once believed the lies of my people. But this man has shown me the truth. He has bled for me, for you, for this empire, and I will not turn away from that truth. She reached for Daniel's hand. He hesitated, then took it gently, his rough fingers closing around hers. This is not duty, she said. This is my choice. The hall trembled with silence. And then slowly applause began. First from the soldiers who had seen him fight, then from the servants who had seen his kindness, then from the people watching beyond the palace walls. The sound grew until it filled the empire. The whisper of change outside, across the stars, the story spread. The alien princess who chose a human. The human who faced death for a crown that mocked him. To some it was madness. To others it was hope. On Earth, people lifted their heads higher. In the alien worlds, whispers began. Maybe humans are not weak. Maybe they are not dirty. Maybe they are something more. And in the palace, as the cheers echoed, Lyra leaned closer to Daniel and whispered, the galaxy was wrong about humans, but I was the most wrong of all. Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes shining with quiet strength. For the first time, he did not stand alone. But in the shadows of the court, not all were pleased. The nobles who had lost power watched with cold eyes. Their plots were not finished. Their whispers had not ended. The princess and the human had won this battle. But the war for the empire's soul had only just begun. And so, beneath the light of the stars, a new chapter began. A chapter of hope, of danger, and of a bond stronger than pride.